is not, but we also have the idea that it's an all-in-one programming system, operating system. It's designed to be connected to other devices. It's open source. It's, as you know, mobile and touchscreen enabled, and it was written on the Linux-based system. It was established back in 2003, and at that time it was touchscreen devices were only just being developed, so they were trying to develop things for non-touch devices. You can see the image there of the Apple Newton, which was a stylus or pen-based system, and then the small device took over from it. This is back in 2005 when Google bought Android. The iPhone released in 2007. And as a competition to that, there was a Open Handset Alliance where manufacturers of hardware and software got together to try to make some sort of standard that would compete with the different names of the Android operating systems, starting with Donut and going to Lollipop, which it is now in 2015. And the distribution is interesting here of the most popular systems, which is gingerbread and ice cream sandwich, taking up 29%, 29% of the market. And the version is often referred to by its name, but also by its version number, and also the API that is available. So we'll talk about those version numbers and which ones to use in the general part of the course. So there's quite a few reasons for developing in Android. Free, open source, and has a big market share. Last year it was said that it took up 81% of the market. 16% of the market was taken up by the iOS system by Apple, and only a small percentage was Windows phones. What we're going to do during this course is also talk about the engineering aspect of these devices and what sort of accessories that we can add to the system. And you can see there a phone plugged into a device with wires and such. We all have also got a device that we're going to use, and I'll briefly show you this one. This is called the Yo-Yo or IO device, and it's a small accessory. It's in a mint tin, where you might find mints, and it's called the Mint Yo-Yo. And you can see the accessories inside there. It's got a USB plug, so you can plug it into your phone. And we'll be giving a demonstration of this accessory later. There's lots of features that you can read about on the Android system. And if you're interested, you can have a look at the framework that exists and where the Apple the Android runtime environment and the application framework and the application sit in terms of this framework. You can see on this application framework we have our usual applications that we'll find on our phone, like the home button, contacts, the phone number, the browser, and all those applications. Part of development is the environment setup, and what you will go through in this course is a development environment, so we can program Android apps. As mentioned before, a knowledge of the Java programming language is required. We give you some tips in Java and some help along the way, but it would help if you do know your Java. An understanding of XML, let's understand what XML is and what it's about. And it's said that your computer hardware and software should run on these specs, but please check the Android sites to see the latest specs for running the Android Studio. Some of the terminology that we come across is IDE, SDK, ADT, ADD, and these stand for Integrated Development Environment. The IDE is whatever development environment you wish to use. There's plenty of platforms to develop Android systems on. We have Android Studio as the preferred IDE, as suggested by Android itself. There's a software development kit, which you may need to plug into an IDE to get Android working. There's also an ADT, an Android development tool, so if we're using systems like NetBeans or Eclipse, you need to plug in an ADT. And the AVD, the Android virtual device, is also called an emulator, and this is the thing that will emulate a device before you actually put the software onto the device. You can test it. So if you had a look at the web notes, and if you've gone onto the Android site, android.com, you would have noticed that the IDE used to be one called Eclipse, and it has been superseded by Android Studio's proprietary IDE called Android Studio. And so when we see Eclipse in this presentation, we can just replace that with Android Studio as being the preferred way of coding, making our programs. So our steps along the way haven't changed. They are to install the components, and then we need to run the IDE. We may need to do some configuring of the IDE and perhaps install the SDK and the ADT or the plugins that we mentioned before. Then we need to write some Java code. What's happening now is that we're starting Android Studio. I'm going to show that on the screen so we can see what that looks like. And we've got a couple of dropouts in the session today, some internet dropouts. And my session was stopped and started a number of times. And hopefully we still have a clear recording of what's going on. Don't forget that if you are having trouble with this internet, this webinar session, we can always use the Moodle to communicate, and we can also chat using email and communicate in other ways as well. So if we miss any part of the webinar, that's okay. It's not a game changer. There's plenty of other ways that we can communicate. Okay, so what I'm showing on the screen at the moment is the Android Studio, and this looks quite complicated when you first see it. On the left-hand side, you can see a navigation pane, which, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it says here app. It's got some things that will be introduced to later, like res, and we've got a Java section as well, where we can see that Java code. And in the middle here, you can see a very small picture of a device, and this is the design section where we get to put buttons on. It's a GUI, so it's a graphical user interface. We can add elements to that graphical user interface by using a simple drag and drop. Down below, in the bottom pane, we have our messages, and there are error messages that come up. And we can also see at the top, we've got some build buttons and run buttons where we can run our app and test it. So that's what Android Studio looks like. And in the notes, we also have some pictures of the Eclipse environment, which is very similar. Our first step is to install these components and to install an SDK if you need to. And the first point to go to is the Android developer website. And if you go to android.com, you'll see that we need to have a look at a particular place in android.com, and that is the developer area. I'm just bringing up android.com now. I'll turn the video off for faster streaming. And all going well, you should see on your screen in this webinar the android.com page. And the home page at the moment usually shows you some fun stuff. So at the moment you can create your own Android character. You can learn more about Android Lollipop. And obviously they've gone to a lot of trouble to make sure that it mentions all the latest devices that you can run on Android Lollipop. So part of this course is not creating your own Android character. And if we want to go to developer, we need to go up to the top to the Eclipse up here, which shows us that we have a developer section. And Apps Developer Resources has the resources that we need. This takes you to developer.com, developer.android.com, and this is where it starts to get a little bit more serious. And one of the things we need is to download the Android Studio and SDK tools. So we can see those initials that we talked about before coming up again. IDE, SDK, essentially the official Android IDE, and developer tools to build apps. So when you click on that, that'll take you to a download page. And it looks something similar to standard download page that you might see anywhere. It'll give you some options as to what platform you want to install your Android system on. So this sometimes takes up a big part of the course, actually installing the Android system onto your computers. Hopefully that won't take too much time, and you should be able to install the system. If you're having any trouble installing the Android system, please write us an email or send your messages on the Moodle page, or chat with each other during the webinar and try to get some hints from each other as to how to install, how to configure the Android system. When you've got Android Studio on your system, there are often some options that we need to do to make sure the SDK is loaded. And if you're using the Eclipse system, which is an older system but still available and still very easy to use, on the PowerPoint presentations there are some ways to configure the ADK plugin. Quite simply, you have to just point to where the SDK has been downloaded to, and that's not too hard. You also need Java installed on your system. So when you install the Android Studio, it will install it without Java, and then when you try to run it, it'll say it needs Java, so then you've sometimes got to go back and install Java again. Java version at the moment is up to version 8, and the Android Studio will currently work with Java 7. So you can install Java 7 quite easily. It has a link on the Android Studio installation file, and that should be fairly easy to download. I'll just go to the Android Studio again. So hopefully we can see Android Studio. Let me just turn off my video. to make things a bit faster. Okay, so if you're still with us, then we're bringing up the Droid Studio and having a look at the places where we can configure the SDKs and set it up so that we can use it with Java. This is being really slow at the moment, so we might even do this as a separate activity. Otherwise, we might be here for half an hour just showing you where to configure it. All right, I think we'll do this in another session because this is it's just taking a long time to load all the different parts of the Droid Studio today. All right, we're back with the session now. And if you have trouble with the Droid Studio and where to find all our configuration and preferences, then hopefully we can give each other some assistance on that. We might even be able to find a quick Google search and work out where to install the, make sure that the SDK is installed. The good thing about the Droid Studio, as opposed to some of the older systems like Eclipse and NetBeans, is that it comes already configured, and it's very, very easy to install it, install Java, and run it, and everything's already configured. Android has taken control over the IDE in a big way, so that you're not using third-party products and trying to tie them together. And hopefully get those to work. Yep, we've got a message from Peter saying, "Hi, Graham, lost connection again." Yes, that's true. I'm losing connection quite often here. So we'll just say. In case you can't hear me. All right, so if you look through the PowerPoint notes, you will see some hints here on how to, all the things you need to configure, like the SDK, the ADTs, and then we get up to the point where we're talking about the emulator, which is also known as the AVD, the Android Virtual Device. And in every IDE, we have the idea of an emulator, which emulates the device that we want to use. And different devices have different emulators. So I'll go now to my Android Studio and show you the Android devices. What you'll see come up on the webinar very shortly is an Android virtual device that I've got running on my laptop. And very simply, it looks like a device. It's got the word Android written in big happy letters on the front. And when you're running a program, testing it, it'll appear here on the AVD, just as it would in any other device. And you can choose which device you use. Let's do that again. We can have a look at the different types of devices are available to us. So there's the Android virtual device sitting in the left hand of the screen. Yeah, hopefully that shows that a little bit clearer. And within the Android Studio, we can see that we can change those different devices. Let's have a go with the tools and the Android AVD manager. And this is running a bit faster now, so we might be able to go back and have a look at those preferences a bit later. The AVD manager is the manager that lets you manage the different emulators that you can have running on the system. If this works, what we'll see is a list of different devices, and they'll be listed by name and by manufacturer as well. So you'll see some things like the Nexus Galaxy come up. You can see different tablets. You can see different screen sizes and devices of all different types here. So I think that's probably an activity probably best left to your own time. Go to the AVD manager, see what devices you can bring up there, rather than waiting to this one. Otherwise, it's going to be too slow. Okay, so the emulators are things that we need to know about. The emulator screen will look something like this. We have a list of emulators. It also shows you which platform, which Android platform that they run on. And the API level matches up with the platform level as well. So the platform level that was very common that we talked about before was 2.2, and that's API level 8. And the application programming interface, sort of initial that I haven't introduced to you yet, that is the programming language essentially that matches up with the Android platform, but also matches up with the Android name like Lollipop or whatever it happens to be. So as you go through Android Studio, you'll be able to create a new virtual device and then choose which platform you want it to run on. So we choose Android 2.2 for a commonly used device that probably will work on most phones. Saw the Android virtual device running. With your device, it could have some buttons on the side like this, and every device is going to look different. But we need some buttons to emulate the real buttons on a phone or device that you may have. The common buttons that we have are the home button, the back button, and the menu button. And there's also some other buttons here that we can use. But the emulator is obviously limited in what it can do. It can't make phone calls because you don't have a SIM card installed on your computer, and but it can access the internet and do a lot of the other functionality that a phone can do. It doesn't have the ability to also rotate, so don't pick up your screen and try to turn it around. So it won't be able to do that. And it does emulate the auto rotate, and sometimes a button on there that you can press, which will rotate the screen into what sort of landscape devices.